there was a few things that we said earlier, you said that I have to come back on, um, and I've heard a couple of your talks and some concepts that it's useful to distinguish, and you've talked about the importance of distinguishing in context of sovereignty, which I absolutely agree with. And there's other variants of sovereignty which are coming out now, which are totally different. So we do have to look at the concepts. And one important concept is superhumanism. And superhumanism for me, well, there's clearly two different paths. One, the true superhumanism, which is okay, and the negative superhumanism. Although the negative superhumanism is the one which is dominant. And this was addressed by Sri Aurobindo in an essay in 1913, where he was criticizing the Nietzschean concept of the superhuman. And he said this will be destructive, this view that Nietzsche has of the human, the triumph of the will and everything else. And of course, Nietzsche was not just important for the Nazis, he was very important for the Bolsheviks, a very, very negative influence. And the idea that you forget everything else, you forget God the lot, and will is the important thing. It's a typical sorceress approach. He said that superhumanism is the type of thing that you will talk about. It's about that engaging which are human faculties integrated into the world, the universe, and that sense. And it's the development of your innate capacity, which both you and I advocate. So they're two different ideas, which I think is useful for the audience to think. And also, there is in the post-humanist idea, they're saying, no, you're not human, and this is anticipating the AI integration of us, and you're really all part of the material world, and therefore we can join you up. That's the consequence. That's the bad version of the good version of spiritual involvement in the world. So that's why we still have to focus on the vindication of personhood, the individual, their particular sovereignty and their rights in relation to the outside forces that want to extract from them. AI, as recent books explain, is an extractive industry. And what they're trying to extract is value from our consciousness. So that was one important distinction. But you talk very much, as I do, about resonance, frequency, and energy. And as I've said, I explain my ideas in relation to accord. And you mentioned about the earth, and I was talking about my, having an actual connection with the earth, barefoot as well. All that idea of just being in contact with the earth is very, very important, as we know. But there is another idea which ties into the discussion of the Schumann resonance and the explanation for that, which I would like to put forward. Now, it might take a while for some people to believe that this is serious, but it's a very, very serious idea, I can assure them. And it explains what this future totalitarian system of global governance will be and how they think. So if you think of Ireland as a classically green country, so we've had more green politics in recent years. So what do you think green is meant to lead to? More green or less green? What is green about? So initially, when green politics happened, I thought that people were serious about the environment and nature and all this. But nothing got to do with that, and I discovered very, very quickly, and and lost interest in it. But now Ireland is being covered by these great windmills, and it's being they're sticking them up over for the electrical grid. And they're putting them in sacred places that I would regard as sacred, that have been untouched by industry, really, really ever, because Ireland skipped the Industrial Revolution in many senses, and in many senses in the country, and therefore it maintained contact with the past. So now we're getting these great big windmills across the place, and as well as that, the solar power is covering the green with black. With black solar panels. Now, a lot of people think that's fantastic. What is green about it? Literally, I mean, if you're talking about the greenness of it, and the explanation, of course, is that really a lot of these movements are nothing about the maintaining balance in nature. They're about building a technosphere. And all of these things create a reliance on a system, a dependence on a system. Elon Musk says, and he's a big proponent of electrical systems, he says that really we'll run the risk of breakdowns in the electrical system, despite increases in electrical power, because the electrical system and the increase is needed to feed AI. And this ties into a visionary, John C. Lilly, who through his experiences realized, and through communication with various entities, that there was a force which was incarnating in this system, which would be a solid state entity, which would cover the earth and would extract all the resources to feed itself, which is quite remarkable, which would be combated actually by a system of coordination of benign entities using synchronicity as the mechanism of communication to people who wanted to oppose it. So, I mean, he was a noted scientist, very, very important in the development of mind control in the United States, developed a flotation tank, etc. So he knew what he was talking about and did those experiments communicating with dolphins. So, as well as that, what do you do? I'm not telling you, but what does one do in acupuncture? One engages with the energy lines in the body, and puts pins in them to move and to channel the energy, to increase or to decrease as appropriate along the meridians in a very, very complex system that is in the human body. Now, someone like you or my interest understands that this same pattern is manifest in the earth. That was known to the Chinese people, is known to the Taoists in particular. Their great interest in the dragon paths, in the lines of energy in the earth and the mountains, and the understanding of that. And this was understood in the West as well. It was clearly they understood about how energy flowed in the earth. It's crystal clear. It's represented in the ancient signs they have. So if you think about it, the insertion of these big points in the earth is having an effect on lands and places that wouldn't have had this effect. And people will think this is strange, but I know that you don't, because if you understand the idea of the astral plane, I could see these spirits from Ireland leaving the land, and that's what has happened and will happen, because this is not a human or a spiritual environment when you industrialize it for a particular purpose, when you begin to shift the energy in the earth itself. And the shifting of the energy by massive interference in the lines of energy without understanding them will distort, there's no question, it will distort nature, and it will distort the resonance in relation to us. Now, as well as that, tying into, well, where does this fit into the picture? You talk, and you're, as I understand it, in relation to your practice and your teachings, is in relation to the traditional idea of the chi, the ki, the energy flowing through us, and how to understand that, how to use it in relation to bringing things into existence or intention or coming into accord, as I would say. And if we have to go back in order to understand this, and you mentioned mesmerism. So Mesmer is a crucial figure in many senses. Mesmer, of course, is using animal magnetism, is using a type of hypnosis, but also some of these things as well. I think that's been forgotten about in the history books. They didn't understand it. They didn't understand it. They knew he was being successful, and later argued that it was a placebo effect. But there was plenty of contrary evidence. And in fact, he was investigated in France in 1785. And on the committee, Benjamin Franklin was on it, because he was very interested in electricity. So what we have here is the start of this idea that there is energy in the human that can be manipulated from or externally in a way which is not healing, which is not traditional. And after Mesmer, we get Galvani, who's experimenting with the frogs, and he said, "Oh, hold on, we could get this movement with an electrical impulse," and they begin to say, "Hold on, well, actually, this stuff is a physical force that we can control." And out of the studies of Galvani and Aldini, this is the context in which Frankenstein came out, when they're saying, "Hold on, electricity is the force." all the intellectuals begin to look at this. There's a talk on now actually at the moment that I was another group that I'm interested in, which about the place, the crucible in Jena in Germany, a small place that a lot of philosophers, Goethe, etc., they were there, and they were interested in understanding this energy. So the electricity became important in relation to understanding human physiology. So we had this nexus between understanding that electricity was somehow linked to the governance of the body. And in the 1830s, we had the first definition of scientist, these Babbage and all these, the computer, and they began to seek a machine to govern. They understood that the ideas of machine could be used to govern people in the future. At the same time, we had the investigation of electricity in the body, and we had these experiments and see that they were bringing criminals back to life and all this kind of stuff. They were having public anatomy lessons where a guy is hung and then he's brought in and they apply a voltage pile to a battery and they get the move and they say, look, this is all life is. So we had to struggle from the time of Mesmer in particular, to say, okay, well, if we control this electricity, we can control humans and we can run society. Now it's as old. It began it's as old as that. So that's the specific basis of the technocracy, or the philosophical stream. That technocracy with a capital T came out in the 1920s and 30s in the US. The idea was to get rid of all of the economy and replace it with management of electrical grid. And I think Elon Musk's grandfather was involved in that. What's Elon Musk interested? He's interested in control of electricity. Why? Because with a total electrically dependent system, you can control everything you do. And then we can control you. We can control you through the interference with the actual fields that surround your body and regard you as electric. And there's an even deeper idea. I've argued that what is happening is that we're being turned into ghosts. We're being ghosted effectively in the movement into post-humanism. But there is an idea of the coming race in the 1870s in a book in London where Bulmer Lytton describes two races, and one of them is effectively a kind of electrical, the vril. They're kind of electrical beings. And we have this idea that actually, I think we see coming through us, that we can manage people, and we can manage people through the electricity system and by focusing on them as electrical beings that they could be somehow reduced to in some way. So what we have in all of these things, superhumanism, and the different paths, and the idea of the natural key and the manipulation of energy, we have the struggle between knowledge of a natural system that we have control of, that we voluntarily abide by, move into, perceive in ourselves, grow from, and a control system, which can only be a totalitarian control system. Left or right, it doesn't matter. That's why, I mean, it's funny they're getting us to, they're getting us. I have no problem on the bicycle thing because I like going around bicycles. It's easy here, but they're getting us to go back to bicycles whether you like it or not. Whereas they spend huge investment encouraging the Chinese to get rid of their bicycles when they had everyone going around on bicycles. When I was young. So I mean, none of this makes sense unless you understand, or one understands, that what we're moving towards is a total electrical grid which controls the human down to the neural level. This is what the system is. And that things like smart dust, etc., which they can spread in the environment, invisible, which can come into to the body, which can be planted in the body, assumed into the body, breathed into the body, can form the connections to this system so that you can be monitored in the smart system. Everything will be monitored. All these advantages are not advantages. All this idea of protecting the planet is clearly not based on protecting the planet. It's not protecting water. It's not protecting greenery, whatever. So really, not only do we have to understand the things that you would be trying to talk to people about, we have to extrapolate from there in relation to understanding what the opposing system is, the adversarial force, and which operates on different levels and different principalities, manifesting in a control Ahrimanic force, as Steiner talked about, which is seeking to deny all those aspects. So that's another reason why it's important and beneficial to emphasize these things at this point in time. So understanding what resonance is, what electricity is, and how these are control systems and potentially systems that will end the human race as we know are critical. So that was just a point to.
Well, I mean, it's a really profound overview. You're threading all these things together that would seem kind of like obscurely benign in scattered sort of like timelines, yes. Right?
Yeah.
So,
right.
Look, Google offers Alexis, and you've got this ability. Cell phones have Siri, and you just have this access to this assistant that just instantly gives you information. And, moreover, that was the first red flag for me. I don't like people overseeing anything that I do, especially to that degree. And it immediately feels like I'm being an invasion of my privacy. And most people were like, oh, no, this is great. I mean, the second social media came out, I was extremely apprehensive and wanted nothing to do with it. And everyone's like, I don't understand what the big deal is. They're going to know this stuff anyway. It's the internet. They know everything. And then, the whole, oh, my goodness, I say something on my cell phone. Next minute, it turns up on a Google search, or I'm getting an ad on the phone. And, the biggest red flag for me here in America was by 2026, we will have governing cars, and they'll all be implemented with it, where if for some reason the higher up in relation to a government agency determines that you are not complying with your drink driving, you're doing this, you're doing that, doing something else, they will commandeer and control your vehicle without any permission. And so these devices are being implanted with cars after 2026. Even now, there's a certain threshold where I don't purchase vehicles after the certain age of, like, even 2017, I purchased my last car that I want to be consciously saying I possess or own, but it's still wired with a bunch of smart devices that in theory could have some type of commandeering of your vehicle, but not to the degree where they're actually legislating this stuff where, hey, if we choose that you pick the color pink and we don't like it and it's an orange day and you said orange and we want you to say pink, we can just turn your car off or direct your car to go in the whatever, you're attempting to. I mean, I think this really is already happening with repos here in this country, where the fall of sort of like having to this dangerous event where you have to go and repo someone's vehicle, they just turn it off. It's like, oh, yeah, well, we know where it is. It's right here. We've got the GPS. And so this is sort of being, from James's observation and for the audience, this is being implemented. So you're slowly cooking the frog. We're getting microdosing of this for many decades. And it's becoming more and more apparent that we're sitting in almost the very last chapter of 1984. If you ever read the book, I know it's quite foreign to most people. My kids are like, what is a book? Here is a book. It's an old a tradition now in our family. We go out of our way to purchase books. We go anywhere. I always want to buy a hoard of them. I don't care what it is, because it's literally turned into something that is, I read about there somewhere on the internet that there's books out there. They're hot. They're solid. You can pick them up. This is sort of like where people get sort of distant from information and being able to nourish themselves with another a view or point of view that isn't regulated by, why don't people use certain search engines? Because it's literally the same information. Like literally maybe 5 years ago, I realized it's the same regurgitated information that is being put before me. I used to be able to search things and find mysterious websites and whatever. and it's literally been commandeered and consciously within the last 5 years, and that's where people are interested in, other alternative ways to access this internet, to receive or reveal something that they haven't seen before. And, most people don't realize, hey, look, I go to YouTube. It's the biggest search engine outside of Google, if not bigger than Google now. And you get all your information there if you look for it. And I'm also victim to that. I do it. It's like, click. Oh, here we go. Instruction video on this. I'm doing that. It's become integrated, just as James is saying. It's like, and we're unconsciously just walking into, literally, this feels like, the deception, because it's like it's quite frankly, I'm not going to use key words, but there's a certain type of like belief system in the way that they sort of have an organized authoritarian sort of processes. One example is a governing body of countries like China. You know what I'm talking about. And it starts to ripple out across all platforms, and you don't even realize you're being led, and I'm not dismissing this, you're being led into an environment where you're like lambs to the slaughter, and you just don't even realize you're the next one on the block. That's what's going on. You're surrendering this flesh and blood. And, I think it's really important that James has made this observation and variable that we're at two extremes. What I'm speaking of is accessing the true soft technology and the power of who you are as a singular, but this flesh and blood is part of the conscious collective that you can access and create fundamental supernatural things that are within this magical thing that we call the humanists. It's magical. It's amazing. And people have lost sight of that. And they're like, I'm just going to dismiss that. And I want to go with the chip, and it makes my life easier. I don't have to think. I can do AI. AI can, to be very honest, AI has been very effective for me within a social media platform, because I can literally create material that would potentially take a group of 10 people days, weeks.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And do it in like 15 or 20 minutes. And it sort of goes under the same sort of like guise of me with my theory and understanding of like platforms like Amazon. I'm like, guys, be very clear on this. And they're like, what? It's free. It's free, man. The shipping is free. It's everything. Why would I wait until there's not another freestanding building on the place of what you call planet Earth, and your shipping is going to go to $57 million per item, and the items that you're purchasing are going to be 500 million times more expensive, and you have no option. It's just that this is your reality. You're shipping things in over the internet, and you're at mercy to whatever they want to charge you. And if you were a bad boy this month, you will not be able to pick up your extra, bag of peanuts or whatever. That's your ration for this month. You are not allowed to, because you made a bad comment that was reflected within our trail of information through a digital, reality. And so I would just like to tell the audience that, James is like moving towards this very frightening, and I'm going to say frightening because a lot of people are listening to our conversation and have been and going, wow, this is amazing. This is amazing. This is amazing. But the sobering reality is before this conversation, didn't even know what was going on. And they're going to walk away going, holy shit. What have I been led to? What have I been programmed for years? Most likely, yes, but this is your moment of consciousness. This is the moment right now where you're listening to our conversation to level up, to realize, to expand, and you can pivot in any direction you want. And as long as, even though this is an expression of your identity, this physical flesh is still in your possession. So you still have the ability to determine what happens to it. What are your thoughts on that? As we were talking about in relation to spiritual awareness, to say I am
I am infinite awareness, and it's like that. If people realize it, that once they realize it, and once they genuinely realize it, they're off to the races. And coming then in relation to realizing, when you pull the veil away, and say, as we're talking about the green thing, and say, well, actually, there's nothing green about this. Is not. For example, not saying there's not loads of good people doing good things. I'm not talking about those, but in relation to conceptually, and when you begin to cross a certain threshold, and those things follow on as well from awareness, because it just doesn't make sense. The stories don't make sense, and it's not fearful, as we've said, once you begin to understand who you are, but it will not resentful is not the right word, but it will understand. The consciousness understands that it's not to be taken away, and it's not to be taken lightly, and whatever divine forces, in whatever way people conceive them, in whatever way we evolved, in whatever way we were created, whatever way you want to conceive that force that comes through us, that force does not want us to disappear to a reduced simulacrum in the control of psychopaths. That's not what the agenda is, unless we have lost so much vision of ourselves, that we've been so dispirited, demoralized, that we cannot conceive. And there is the argument about learned helplessness by Seligman, that this is a thing that happens with animals they've studied, and they know it. So part of the demoralization is the idea that we live in a permanent cultural revolution, and this is a deliberate policy. So you go asleep, and tomorrow you wake up and you read a paper or whatever online, or news, and something that you believed in yesterday has been overthrown, and tomorrow you're not allowed to believe in that. Something you believed the day before that is a heresy now. A thing you believed a month ago is ridiculous now. And even you see it in these things. I noticed it a few years ago, and I mentioned it here, about this whole, every day I see these things. You've been boiling an egg the wrong way. So you get some experts come in and tell you how to boil. Apparently, I don't read them, but there's all these things. Why are they putting these in? It's a constant effort to destabilize the individual, utter assault on the conception of the human, on the conception of the individual, on the conception of tranquility, on the idea that you're going to have the there's some various concepts about or woo or of stability that you can maintain in a general sense. And I know that you understand that in the evolution spiritually, what you want to get to is a concept where the heavens and earth are united in you, so that you can live in the upper realms in a practical context. And that's what Maslow studied. The reason why he was studying self-actualization, because he understood that everyone at the top of the pyramid, who are very successful in whatever field, had got there because they had some mystical experience. So mystical experience will lead some people to go to the forest, certainly. But the evidence suggests that what happens is people who have mystical experience, mystical development, or come into mystical accord, they get better at the things that they're doing in the real world, and they choose. And they may not do the same things that they've always done. But that was the essence of the psychological studies of the thing. So as well as the benefit for the individual, every individual that genuinely wakes up, and I think that's one of the reasons why they chose this word woke as a simulacrum of genuine spiritual awakening. It's a play with mind. It's to turn it into a purely materialist context. Everything about that becomes about the material world, and you're dragged into the outer manifestations, the extended phenotype, which is not the genuine awakening as is understood to the world. So that's another simulacrum. So everyone that does waken up in a spiritual context and develop their skills will begin to not do things that they might have done, and alternatively do positive things. And they will also contribute on an energetic level and a resonance frequency energy to come into accord at the higher level, to build this alternative force, which can begin to advocate and inform to shape the forces behind, to make the people conscious that are making these systems, that ultimately it ends up in disaster. This idea of mechanizing, controlling consciousness and human consciousness, treating people like animals, worse than animals, because part of the idea is that the human is an animal without any higher skills, and we know that they don't treat animals well. I mean, this is the scenario that's being posited for us as they begin to abolish. So I don't say any of that in a depressed way. I don't say any of that in a way to dispirit people at all. It's the opposite. It's the reason why people must retain their spirituality and assert their spirituality and vindicate their spirituality. So I never want to sound depressing, but the truth is depressing for people sometimes, especially if they've heard it first. I understand that. It's difficult when people begin to say, well, hold on a second, I understand that, and I didn't really pay attention to that, and I've been distracting myself with all this kind of stuff, which was meant to be, and I realized something is not right, and that induces a type of fear, and then there's a type of grief when they begin to understand that a lot of the things they believed in are not sustainable, not true, and actually the world out there doesn't believe in those things. And there's a lot of people out there that are not like the picture that have been presented to us. And then people, as a spiritual survival, begin to seek out people that they think are speaking the truth. And even in that context, we have the true thing and the simulacrum thing. As warned by Jesus, there will be false prophets as well. And it's difficult to tell, because even in ideas of the Antichrist is someone who's popular first, so we have all this difficulty. And that's why there has to be a true individual bit about it. There has to be that true individuation process, not to retreat, not to become atomistic or alienated, but to have the confidence to expand in that sense, so that one can contribute. Because as you have said, that expansion and contraction is the nature of life, is the nature of Taoism, is the nature of social context as well. And we have to, or in that context, people have to expand their consciousness, and that expansion of consciousness is not going to lead one to a fearful place. It may lead to a clear place, and clarity is very important in relation to all of this. But it's not a fearful place, and it is an underlining of why you or I are interested in these things, or why they're so important, or why they're more important than anything else. Because that is we can fail on everything. You can lose loads of things in life, as we will. But you can't give away or lose your spirit that you have control of. That's what you can't do. So everything else doesn't matter if you fail, in many sense. You have to retain that in its healthy state, in a way that's capable of growth.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So you look at the rippling effects. I like to bring people's attention when they're on board. I'm on board. Woo woo! I've just woken up.
Woo away.
Woo away. That's right. And it's like, and where there's a fundamental difference. We're not talking about being woke. We're talking about awakening. There is a very big difference. Yet a lot of people tend to sort of resonate to that very that they're the same. Oh no. And then of course, you look at the underlining theme, right? So for centuries, for thousands of years, one of the tools for ritual throughout all history has been wine, alcohol, something of that nature. Now, notice something. Have you noticed the theme? Now, within that, you can sort of commandeer your nervous system, your consciousness. You can sort of drop it down a couple of notches temporarily, but it's never going to take hold of you permanently, right? So it's a brief sort of like respite, slow down, just be in a state of sort of like I'm just taking this moment to embody whatever that might be, and I'm just taking my load off, whether it's a celebratory ritual or I'm just looking for a buzz. But alcohol has been around for thousands of years. Now, if you notice the theme, all of a sudden we're going deep diving into the psychonaut exploration of things that will not be temporary but permanent in your perception of reality. And if you don't get a handle of that, you will pretty much go off course, because it has fundamentally good and potentially problematic effects if you're not taking it to a place of high levels of consciousness. I've come across gurus that literally smoke a bag of weed right in front of me and can obtain levels of consciousness beyond your wildest dreams. One of the things that I have to do as a priest through the training is to take a sealed bottle of alcohol, i.e. vodka, remove the alcohol from the bottle, place it in another container of liquid, and then you drink that bottle. If you haven't really obtained that level of consciousness to extract it, you're going to have a bad day. And so these are levels of awareness that are taken through the energetics that go way beyond this physicality. There's mastery to it. You develop these skills, but it's absolutely obtainable. Now, this is one example, the charge we're getting right now. The reality is that alcohol is very transitory and temporary way to commandeer your focus. Yet, when you get involved with things that are more heavily developed within the deeper seed of what we call the gateway to high levels of consciousness, it's becoming extremely popular right now. And then we go one step further. Why is the legislation all of a sudden this huge push for weed across the continents, across planet Earth? Weed is now all of a sudden being recognized as this sort of a great way to just take your load off, get a little relaxed. Sort of there is this sort of fundamental underpinning that's going on. So first of all, alcohol's really bad. I need you to understand what it's going to do to you. That it's amaldehyde. It's going to destroy you. Do you see the chemical response that happens in your liver when you're drinking alcohol? Now, the effects of alcohol being legalized for so long, even within the prohibition days of the early 20s in the history of this country, there's a different cycle of how people respond when they're not able to access something, the underlying need to desire it. And once it's accessible, things that sort of sedate you, things like marijuana, which will just put you in a place of, I don't give a shit about anything. And it's all of a sudden, this alcohol is really bad. See, look at the effects. Now, this is a theme. This is not something that's sort of like all of a sudden, and in technically in theory, perhaps maybe through the social media sphere, they're slowly microdosing it and making it, you don't want to drink alcohol, it's really bad, but take some LSD and smoke some weed and we'll help you commandeer your level of consciousness. Another gateway. People need to understand from the level of that, the way James is sharing this overview, there is an underlying programming that is taking place, ladies and gentlemen, that James and I are aware of, but perhaps maybe you're not, as you're maybe puffing away on your doobie right now watching this podcast. I do not discount or dismiss anyone's gateway to whatever it is that enlightens them. But understand this, you're getting messages in all different degrees. First and foremost, the layer of messaging starts with your physical body speaking to you. Now, the physical body will speak to you in the form of, am I expressing myself in a constant that is not regulating thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and I'm getting either thoughts of great things or thoughts of bad things within this duality. I'm getting aches and pains. It's all expressing through this tuning fork. Then you get this emotional content, which is the next degree of, now there are other messages that are coming into play that are giving me clear messages from a higher state. So we're going from physical to mental, emotional, And now you have this intuitive sense where once in a while you get a message to go here, to go there, feel something inside yourself. And of course, then we get to the next level of the spiritual realm where you're tuning into something that's greater than what you believe is this present moment in consciousness, that's feeding you a very clear message of how to deal with the emotional content, how to deal with the physical content in layered effects, and ultimately a higher state of awareness, this profound knowing of God, of Jesus, of Buddha, of Tao, of universe, of Shiva, whatever it is. Be very clear, ladies and gentlemen, the onslaught of wanting to destroy your belief system, we're in the fourth quarter right now in this timeline in history where it's very apparent that people are dismantling that. And you're just like, oh, well, that God thing, it's a bunch of megalomaniac cult members that just want to force their garbage religion down your throat. Anyone that calls themselves a priest is some type of cult leader or psychopath. And this is sort of resonating through over the years. And it's come to a precipice. Like we kind of talk about the cycle of spirituality, atheism, religion. We're there right now, only they just want to erase all of it. You are now Mr. Roboto, and you will come to work with 347654. And when we say come to work, we're not talking about you actually going to a job. We're talking about commandeering your physical flesh for the benefit of a greater cause of harnessing your life force. And so now we get down to something completely different. I kind of changed gears a little bit, my friend, but I figured you could take it from here.
You've set off so many sparks there. Well, when you're drinking alcohol, what's the generic name for vodka, brandy, spirit?
Yeah.
It's the simulacrum again. It's the false one. Give you a sense of euphoria, give you something that feels like. Now, when the monks, for example, a lot of the monks developed alcohol and that, and they developed it in a very specific context, and they took it in context, and in the community was in context, and when on a small scale, it was a useful thing. And when we read back on very Irish hundreds of years ago, well over a millennium ago, about the lawyers and they're having drinking feasts, but you had to be articulate at the thing. It was part of a general social context. During the time when Ireland was one of the great threats to the British Empire, it developed, at that time, later on, the last few hundred years, it developed one of the biggest breweries in the world, Guinness. Now, if anyone does not understand by now the obvious connection between a massive brewery and a rebellious population, well, then they have to begin to think about it. You think that that's an accident? You think that came from the community? What an effective way to kind of begin to pacify, people. People never see anything, any possibility that could be true. Dissipate energy. In fact, it's an interesting thing that most of the great Irish writers were characterized by the fact that they left Ireland because they said if they're in Dublin, they'd be spending too much time in the pub and they'd be only talking. That's why Joyce was talking about silence, cunning, and exile was the only way for Irish writers. Anyway, that's just. But I mean, I love pubs in Ireland. But when I said, okay, well, I have to move into the final gear in relation to spirituality, and for other reasons, they go together in a holistic way. I gave up alcohol. I don't know how long ago it was, 10 years, maybe. I don't know, but quite a few years ago. I was very open to it in a social context and coming from an Irish background. And other reasons why as well was when the kids were small, I started doing a lot of martial arts as a result of bringing them to the things. And saying, here, what about trying this? So in my 40s and 50s, I'm starting off doing judo and capoeira and things like that. And I said, well, okay, well, if I'm doing this, I want to make sure my body's in good shape. So I did a series of things, that like the hot yoga and, in temperatures and all that, and a lot of things to, to cleanse the body. Interesting, you can have experiences in that, and the heat too, of course, because sweat lodges are the classic way that Native Americans do it. And I gave up alcohol and then began to explore them. And again, you see the same things. What's capoeira? Capoeira is a martial art, and it is effective. A lot of people think it's not effective. It's very, you don't want to meet a good capoeirista and annoy them. They can do serious damage to you. So they get in a circle. One, there's a person playing the berimbau, a monochord, like Pythagoras and the idea of connecting to the universe, which is what they're doing. You're in a circle, they move. One person kicks, the other person contracts. Then they kick and the other person moves in defensive way. So it's yin and yang as evidence there before you in relation to a practice. Surrounded by a circle of people clapping in music to get the beat and linking with the heavens. I mean, it is. So, but the point is that all those things, your ability to engage in whatever explorations you need to do in an informed context, begins to make it very, very difficult if you're being sensible to take intoxicants and take in things that interfere with the body. And then when you understand in the, I won't say political sense, because it's a sociological sense that we're talking about how the world is working, where these forces come from. They got, again, you understand, it goes together, that we know that Aldous Huxley said that we're not going to use the boot in the future, and that was where the boot in the face was wrong in some senses by Orwell. He said we're going to make people love their servitude. And of course, drugs are the most useful. Just to explain a little example, William Sargant was a person who was interested in the brain, and he began a lot of this ideas of how to govern individuals came from dealing with soldiers when they came home, because there was 200,000 British soldiers that came home that couldn't do anything. They weren't physically harmed, they were mentally harmed after the First World War. So you had a whole lot of people that were traumatized by the horror that they had seen, again, for no real advantage to Britain or anyone else in the end of it, and all the horrific things they'd seen, to supply the sacrifice of blood for the energetic systems of the military-industrial complex. And then at the time of Dunkirk, there was a load of the British who were brought back during the evacuation, and a lot of them were traumatized. And Sargant and others began to work on them. They didn't know what to do with they didn't have the techniques to, so they began to experiment on them. They experimented with various things, barbiturates, amphetamines. That's why you get them in America. They didn't. A lot of them come from Europe. Same as LSD, 1943, Switzerland. There's a story about him and his bicycle and all that. But the Nazis were involved in it. They're all doing this because they're looking for ways to control the mind. The opportunity came from a context where they had to deal with a practical problem. So they began to experiment barbiturates, all that, and began to see the effects. And also, he wrote a paper in 1940 about trauma-based mind control, and he was told by the War Department to not say anything more about that. So they began to understand, and this informed what they did when the British set up the CIA and that through the Canadian system, because there was a big influence from British intelligence in relation to over there. And again, we talked about the empire of the mind. So the empire of the mind is a multi-layer attack on, and you used the word neurology. So they're quite open on this. There's a paper in 2020 by NATO on neuro warfare, and they make clear that there's a kind of soft element. This is the general assault on your neurology, getting on your nerves. The media, the coordination, the elimination of other voices, the messaged content, the programming, that's there. But more specifically, there's social management. So, for example, Sargant went off to Africa he did some awful experiments with putting people asleep for months on end so they wouldn't wake up, to see what effects it would have. Some awful experiments were going on. And they're experimenting as well on the brain in various places around Britain. This is where what C.S. Lewis sees, and that leads him to write That Hideous Strength, the book about which anticipates scientocracy with an occult scientific elite, which is reflecting H.G. Wells' idea. They're experimenting with the brain. So the developments in cybernetics and artificial intelligence, but cybernetics in particular, which is about governance, were a product of this evolution of the mind. So this is a replication of the same split we see in relation to electricity in the body. We're saying, okay, well, we can control the brain now. We can use this as social governance. We don't have to send our army out, and fight with the IRA in Ireland. We can just send them, we can send them the drugs. I mean, I'm not picking the Irish context, but in any community. So then so Sargent also said, which is very interesting, I'm very suspicious about the whole music industry, nearly the entirety of it. Now, there's a few people to get through, but the entirety of it in relation to the 60s. And Sargent wrote about that. They went out to Africa, and they saw that in certain tribes, the way that the elders kept the young males under control was they created these dancing marathons where the young guys that might kind of take over would dance all night, and they exhaust themselves. And once you got a system which would exhaust the younger, then you had social stability. So I think a lot of the music industry was intentionally designed to diffuse the power of a critical mass of people who were going to have their world changed. And that went on. You see it at various phases, and there's always a drug associated with each particular phase. So you come to techno, and people are dancing all night, when they change society with a drug, synchronized with the music. This is all out of the book of people that worked for the various governments. LSD developed in a lab, Switzerland. Again, Switzerland is critical in the evolution of this. It's the base, of course, of the World Economic Forum, the World Trade Organization, the bodies that promote euthanasia, the bodies that promote the UN bodies on migration, etc. Switzerland is a critical place. So in relation to drugs, the protection of intellectual property of drugs, WIPO is based, etc. So there's a neuro spectrum which is being controlled in this. So the governance, and I've called it, I'm finishing a book at the moment on this. It's going to be an AI spectrum, and if we spell it SPECK, the specs are important. The dust that can be inserted into your body, or I want to find out who my ancestor is. So you send off your sample. Send off your sample. What are you sending? You're sending a speck, again, that gives information. Instead of the push factor into your body, there's a push and a pull out of, or a giving out of your body, or you pushing out in this kind of taking a bit of your mouth, sending the cells, and then they have such valuable information about you, and they can do so much with that. So it's the spec again, it's the management of the small detail into a system where ultimately the machine to govern will be a matter of governance of your nervous system, utilizing a multilateral strategy, which is intended ultimately, certainly denies the spirit, but to replace the spirit and to suppress the spirit. So we won't have an option if we succumb to this system to be able to exert our spiritual authority. Now, for me, I believe that consequence when you give over your spiritual authority is the same as the deal with the devil, the Mephistophelian pact, that you cannot go to good places when you begin to give away the God-given, the divine-given, the Tao-given bit of you, that aspect. But this is a deliberate policy. The empire of the mind is going to be global. It will unite different things. They could, for example, work with China because they're the ones that, the government in the United States are the ones that facilitated with Britain. The war the war thing going on, you don't have to be a genius to work out that they're fighting in Afghanistan to no avail. They go to another place, they work to no avail, but it does destabilize the world population so that they can have greater control on these things. And of course, the British Empire was fighting in Afghanistan, was involved in the Israel, the creation of the state, and it was involved in the Crimean War, which Ukraine, same places. These are long imperial struggle that was going on, and people do not see it because they're suffering from a neurological disease, a cultural amnesia. They can't remember what happened yesterday, and they're certainly not looking at what happened 150 years ago to see the patterns of what happened. So what we're facing is this empire of the mind, and it's doing it seductively. And that's why I oppose this idea. I support people's right to explore in their own way. I don't criticize people. That's up to them. But they must be aware that the LSD and the promotion of psychedelics, for example, are the promotion of a sense. Now, there are medical things that support, in health, etc. But there's a lot of duff medical reports these days as well. But they're presenting a simulacrum of spirituality, the sensation of spirituality without the discipline necessary to genuinely create it. And it becomes a simulacrum. And they're being told that this is a great rebellious movement, whereas really they're just supporting the state, and you're allowing the corporate governance system of the world, because we're talking about corporations ruling the world. And now the mechanisms are getting better and better. And yes, it's no surprise that they're saying, "Oh yeah, let's legalize this all over the world at once." The coordinated action. That it's one of these deals where they're getting so picky on everything else. It doesn't make sense. There's an inconsistency unless one sees this utter consistent imperial management idea and the deep belief that they can manage. Now, in their favor, they're very good at this type of thing. They're very, very, the British Empire and the institutions I had a lot of very, very clever people working for these goals. And even in the context of electricity, if you look at Maxwell and that, one of his famous essays was on governors. So the governing of the flow in energy, it's all linked. So what people have to do is begin to have a bit of a concentration of the stuff that seems disparate, to have a kind of collapsing of the information wave in the realization, associate with the growth. But it's consistent with one's the optimum way forward. I noticed, for example, as you get a bit older, I had a deep intuition about just the subtle effects of alcohol on your balance. It will affect you a lot. It will affect you when you're older more, and people may not notice that. You will notice it when you're doing things that require great. Judo requires balance. You want the optimum balance. So these things affect your nervous system, as you've said. So they're all part of a whole, and it's a deliberate whole. It's not accidental. It's not this thing happening here, this thing happening here. Most of the things that are for our own good are not for our own good. Most of the things we're meant to be against are not necessarily as bad as they think. And the spiritual tradition, we have to defend and support each other against these assaults.
No, amen to that, brother. I mean, listen, I distinctly remember a turning point in my reality when I was a young boy, and I had a group of about 20 friends, and I sort of went at the age of 11 deep into bodybuilding and powerlifting, and all my friends were popping ecstasy, LSD, smoking weed. That was the thing. And so I kind of just was the hang along kind of guy for a couple of years, till finally we were, in 13 and 14, and I'm this muscle bound gorilla sitting in the corner of the room while my friends are just getting completely shit faced, off the planet. in delusion, really, quite frankly. And so what happened was one of them turned to me and said, "Look, you got to go." I'm like, what do you mean? I'm sitting there reading a muscle and fitness magazine. They're just my childhood friends. What am I doing? I'm just hanging out. You guys are getting high. I'm reading the muscle and fitness magazine. You have to go. What do you mean? You're killing my buzz, bro. Unless you take a pill or smoke some weed, you got to leave. And I was like, really? We've known each other since we were a young boy. What, I mean, really? Really? And so this is how it starts with commandeering. You know, you wouldn't assume that even someone of my generation would have, you know, friends that were that deep in it as young teenagers into participating in this type of stuff. Oh, absolutely. The curiosity is there. Parents are absent. They start to just do whatever they want. And so, in effect, what happened was by the time we got through our teenage years in our early 20s, out of those 20 friends, and they were all taking lots of LSD. I'm talking like tabs a day, like 2 and 3 tabs a day, and going to school, and, you know, I mean, just nonsense. Absolutely. And in my mind at the time, I wasn't really as clear as I am today about my direct communication with my source to the Tao, my teachers, which I could have dialogue with quite clearly. But there was a message saying, do not touch that. Do not go anywhere near that. And they're like, man, come on. It's ecstasy. It's like we have a good time. We get drink the alcohol, do the thing. And I was just like, no. And they're like, man, you're so weird. You got to go. And so consequently, by the time we're in our late teenage years, I still remained friends with these people from a distance to a certain degree. Some of them were still creating friendships. Out of those 20 friends, 14 of them committed suicide. 14. We're not talking 1, 2 randomly, 14.
That's sad, yeah.
And to this day right now, I have one friend left, and he has been clinically diagnosed with schizophrenia and has a tough time working through a normal day in the office of his reality. And so out of those 20 kids, myself and him were left. Everyone else is gone, dusted, done. Now, that was on the, LSD, you know, look, the Beatles did it and blah, 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 and all that. I mean, and now we really have a full force type of like need to legalize this stuff. I mean, there's one state, we have a state here in America that literally has legalized every drug. It's like, I think it's Oregon or Colorado, whatever. Every drug. It's like, hang on, so you're getting this idea, and I always remind people, all thoughts of your mind are not yours. And we've gone over this, we've spoken about it, and the reality is you are having these sort of ideas planted in what you perceive. And I mean, look, it's so easy to force someone to have a thought. I mean, thought projection, spirit projection is one of the Taoist trainings. It's this is ancient. This is super ancient, and I teach people how to do it. But I teach it under the guise of you're going to be very, very, very mindful and conscious of what you're doing, and if you're doing it in an underlining tone of attempting to commandeer someone's perception, that is not okay. You're not. That's not even on the table, and you will fall subject to your own karma. And so that, you know, that installs a very clear understanding when you're given these tools that, you know, you can go down that path, but you will be subject to your own karma. So, and in that situation, people will embed a level of fear that's sort of their own governing sort of like agent that will help them understand this is for a higher level of consciousness for the collective, not something to manipulate someone and of course go down the route of being the puppet master, which many people tend to do. And it's kind of like it's extremely sobering. So you look at, all right, okay, so we throw alcohol on the masses, people crash and burn, it's legalized. You find that the average person doesn't even look at it. Fundamentally, when you look at it on a societal level, there's this group of people that have been commandeered, and their expression of addiction is alcohol, and it comes in all different forms. And you look at the absolute collateral damage that takes place when someone allows that to commandeer their reality, and it's evident through history. Yet there's a majority of the society doesn't even look at it twice and doesn't understand. If you look at someone who's literally, with their own words, struggling with addiction per se, which I want everyone to understand, human beings are designed that way. It doesn't matter. Even if you're like, well, I don't drink alcohol, I don't take drugs, I don't overeat. Well, it's transmuted in one frame of your reality, and that's okay if you're aware of it. But most people are not, so they don't realize, I don't do any of these things, but I love to drink 5 cups of coffee. I'm completely highly strung and stressed out all the time. I overwork. I do all the, it just transmutes in other levels, which can definitely be regulated through your emotional content and how you expand yourself from your own internal practices and your awareness of this higher state. And so all this stuff sort of starts layering itself and getting on top of a bigger picture that you and I are aware of, but it comes back to the governing the governing body, or let's use this sexy word, the agency of control, where you look at more poverty driven places, and the quickest way, and this has been an admission for many people that have been advocates to dismantle this type of programming. But it's like in America, it's like the alcohol source, the drug source, and then some sort of place where they can cash in their food stamps or whatever else has been given to them from the government agencies, where they don't have to think. They're just like, their little infrastructure is being set that they switch off, and they just get what they're given, and they stay in this comatose state of not being present at all, not being anywhere, not in a way where we're talking about an expansive state of consciousness, just being absent. And then with that, you can commandeer the physical body, and that would come in the form of what nanochips and smart dust and all these types of things that people are like, that's ridiculous. That sounds like some scientific movie. Eat vegan food and see what happens. Eat the equivalent to a vegan meat and work out what's going on, and wonder why all of a sudden you start thinking different thoughts and processes because you're eating this plastic crap that they're attempting to serve you up as an idea of what you think is a great way for the collective, the green expression of a better future for the world. I mean, this is so ominous when you really start peeling it back, and not with fear, but the true nature and the depth of this, and the green expression, just as James was talking about, has nothing to do with the betterment of planet Earth or the preservation of mankind. This is about money. This is about power. This is about control. Don't get twisted. If you think that there's something else going on there, and you picking up the piece of plastic in the street, or you lobbying to boycott plastic straws because they're screwing up the ocean. I mean, come on now. I mean, anyway, I'm going to stop right now. I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Well, God rest your friends. That's sad, all right, but I think it is, and sobering is a good word, and I think it's useful for anyone that does listen to this sometime. Sometimes you need a little reminder to help you on your way as well, and they can go together, because your spiritual realization can be linked to some kind of rejection of something which is negative for you. And of course, that's why in Alcoholics Anonymous, that I haven't been part of, but the way they use God, the appeal to a divine source, to remind people about who they are, and it's effective, and it also underlines the fact that these things are substitutes, and that you have to go back to the real thing. So that's an important and an interesting story. I could see that you did use you were well familiar with weights and that, which the size of your shoulders and that, and all of these things are useful paths for people to become aware. Whatever way a person does it, doing activities, doing physical activities, doing anything like that put you in touch with yourself, with your body, and the way it's meant to function, with a bit of challenge, with a bit of resistance, is important. And also to take one's mind off destructive things, because some of these things are difficult to do if you're doing something destructive. They don't go together. And of course, well, it's worse in relation to the drugs, because of course we know that a lot of the Western governments have been involved in the illegal drug trade for various plans, and that's evidence. And of course, think of what Central Intelligence Agency is, and some of the intelligence agencies. It's telling you what it's about. It's not. There's three meanings of intelligence for me. There's the information about yourself and that phenomenon, the phenomenon itself. There's the intelligence in the sense of information about other people. But the older idea of intelligence that you see in the magicians and John Dee and that is the intelligence describes the spiritual beings. So bodies that are involved in intelligence are interested in all of these things. Well, why is a spy agency interested in UFOs? They're not. They're interested in the totality of intelligence, in managing it, and in managing your intelligence. All these governments are, whatever country, not unique to that. They're just more developed and sophisticated and advanced in the United States and Britain have always been the leaders in this, and they, of course, they work in the organization. But it's the same in China, it's the same in Russia, it's the same in other countries. They just may not do it as quite so well. And in relation to food, I've said this to a few people, and I end up saying things, and it's a bit before the time. One of the great failings I've had is that you're saying things, but it's too early for people, and they don't listen to you. It's consistent. I warned in some of my writings about some of these things, but honestly, nobody would have paid any attention to them, or about communities being displaced through various forces, and the ghost host community. Nobody, and not the least bit of attention for that. I remember writing an article about computers and the law, and I presented a paper in Edinburgh, and one of the advanced ones, one of the enlightened ones, years after said, "Oh, I heard this paper and it didn't really register with me, but now I'm beginning to think I might be, So there's a bit of a time lag, but we don't have that luxury anymore. So I say to people, you're going to be facing massive euthanasia things where the computer system will be saying, listen, San, the computation says it's time for your euthanasia, and they could probably do that in your electrical car. Where's that? But think of a grim. So that euthanasia is really on the cards. They're accelerating that. So this is the kind, compassionate society that is claiming that it wants to extend our life. So the lie is, in the transhumanism, oh yeah, we can increase your life now. You'll be able to live. You don't have to worry, and there'll be no diseases and all this kind. At the same time, they're ramping up this euthanasia. It just doesn't go together. Cop on, folks, in relation to this. But the insects thing, I've said to people, educated, but what are you talking about? There he goes again, imagining this thing about insects. So you say, well, why are they putting insects in our food? Why is it so important to put insects in our food. It's massive. And there's ingredients in things that people won't know about, won't recognize in standard food. Why are they putting these?
Yeah.
Sorry?
The smart dust.
Well, no, it's part of that. Well, it's yeah, well, it's possibly grimmer, yeah. But that is easy to get through. It'll get easier and easier, and people will take it voluntarily in other substances and in other things put in their body for medical procedures. But this one is quite interesting. So I started saying that a couple of years ago. It's one of the things like geoengineering. You say you understand that they're messing about with the weather. No. That's the geoengineering. It's no. They're doing in the open in San Francisco Bay at the moment, shooting stuff up in the air. And during the week after the floods in Dubai, they're beginning to report, well, 50 countries are actually using geoengineering. So this has been going on from the 40s, the time of the growth of this thing. They used it in Vietnam, etc. So that's a reality. So the idea that they're not putting things in the sky is just a massive lie, which is being shown up by the evidence. But the insects, you say, well, why do they want us to eat insects? They say, oh, it's a protein substitute and all this. And there's they're planning on insect farms, massive insect farms, to produce all these fake burgers and all that. This is well underway, especially as they're taking farmers off the land because they don't want you eating any food. Now, the thing that worries me about this, if I say, well, why in particular insects? There's often been, if you look in religious scriptures, there's often been prohibitions on the eating of certain things, or messing around with bats and things like that. I mean, these have always been prohibited in the traditions. You just don't do it. They knew that it was dangerous. But in relation to the insects, there is in the insects and the substance chitin, chitin. Now, the problem that I have, and I don't know how exactly this works, but in the patents for tissue engineering, they use chitin as a substance in tissue engineering. So chitin in the body can be used to reshape things. So we're being told in this age of transhumanism that we will have to eat food which has this substance in it, which is capable of making physical, as far as I understand it, making physical alterations in perhaps conjunction with other substances that are in the body. Now, J.D. Bernal in the book, The World, the Flesh and the Devil, so this is not me making it up, this is a scientist who's the father of the science of scientists. He was actually an Irish guy, a crystallographer, the man behind the start of the DNA examination, a great scientist, a Stalinist, as most of the crystallographers were in Britain, intense materialist. In his book, he explains how we're going to move into silicon. So we're going to transform into silicon. And he said that scientific corporations, this is all in the book, in the 20s, he was part of the mainstream of this movement to the empire of the mind. He said scientific corporations would take over the world by stealth, and then the scientific elite would be ensconced, and then they could do experiments. He said that the intelligentsia, the elite, would increase space exploration, so they would be able to escape the Earth. That's the breakaway civilization. They would have a place to go to when the stuff, the damage of science happens. So space exploration, and then there would be transhumanism to increase life extension, because these materialists don't want to die, and especially when the things that they've been doing, they don't want to be going to one of the hells that come up, whether in Taoism or in Christianity or Judaism. So they want to increase their life, of course. So you see this characteristic associated with this group that they're going to run the world. I mean, H.G. Wells laid it out in New World Order and Hope and Conspiracy. Space exploration is important, not to explore the heavens, but so they have an escape route. That's the key thing, and that's why you have Mars now. It's not for your good. they'll certainly send out people like they did to Australia, to get it ready for whatever the build up. So then you have space exploration, you have life extension, and that's your transhumanism. So the Julian Huxley, who came out from that milieu in '57, starts promoting transhumanism, and all the ingredients that we see, the things that Elon Musk are testable about those things. They're totally consistent, about. And then he also said about we changed the humans to silicon, so they wouldn't be flesh and blood. Women wouldn't give birth. They'd have this ectogenesis, and this is becoming mainstream as well. It all comes from a plan. That's where Brave New World was written. They were seeing this, and he's telling you what they're planning. So, in that context, if they're putting, he said about experiments, he said that they would change people, the people that didn't want to be changed, the Luddites, the bioconservatives. He didn't use those words, but that would be the class. They could be experimented upon as human animals. They may not know they're being experimented on. This is the father of the science of scientists, revered in China in relation to his understanding of China, still revered, still behind a lot of big bioengineering thing. So he's openly admitting, no secret, they're going to experiment on the people that don't voluntarily take the thing. And he said, in relation to the humanity of scientists, if we look at the humanity of science, meaning their compassion and their curiosity, he fears that the curiosity will win, and there's no doubt. So it's been set up for the control by an elite who are curious and willing to experiment on people that, they don't believe that they have any special rights because they've thrown out God and they've thrown this. But this is clear. So I don't read the newspaper. I don't pay attention to any politics in Sweden or but occasionally I hear things that my ears break up. But generally, I live my life by trying to look at the things that I'm interested in and not getting dragged into, the theatre and the Tweedledum, Tweedledee and all this kind of stuff. But they have been experimenting in schools, giving out insects in the foods to school children. This is happening not just here. This is happening. I guarantee you'll hear about this in the United States very, very soon. Someone will say, hold on, what's this ingredient? Oh, well, we've been just saying that the children like this insect. So, if you presume that the medical establishment would not experiment on humans, I think you're mistaken. If you think that this vast, because it's not about money, it's about this deep power, this deep occult kind of driven dark power to control human consciousness. That's what I call the greatest game. Money doesn't give this thing of power, the power over life and death of your ancestors and your forebears and your descendants. That's great power. It's kind of cosmic power for these new titans, who are the new superhumans, the new Prometheans. But these things are utterly consistent with what the scientists have said they're doing. Now, when you're eating your insect burgers, you're convinced that it's for the green planet. Well, how is this? It doesn't. But these things are upon us. They have happened. They've been planned. They've been presented. It's possible that if you investigate, or one investigator, not someone who's very conscious about the food, will find these ingredients in the food already. And there's going to be, you won't have any choice when they get rid of the farmers. You're going to be eating this stuff, and it won't be good for you as well as all the other stuff. So there's really sinister things. These are not, the only conspiracy it is the conspiracy they told us. They told us. H.G. Wells wrote the book, The Open Conspiracy. We're not doing it secret anymore. We're going to tell the people. They're telling us, but people are not listening, and they're according with this. So there's what I would say, again, not to depress people, but really wake up, because we need people to wake up. And it doesn't need to be a huge amount of people to begin to wake up, to begin to unleash the power of human consciousness. But these things are happening. And if you have children, and I have children, we have a responsibility, not just to our child, but to every other child, that they don't face a world run by mad scientists. And I don't have any problem saying by mad scientists. I'm not against science. I'm against scientism. Scientism is the exaggeration and inflation of science beyond its proper boundaries, where it becomes an ideological venture which possesses the minds of the people that have the technical power, where it's intended and calculated to possess other people as well.
You brought us to this point where we're talking about, don't be twisted, ladies and gentlemen. They're already experimenting. Well, I think without, creating any red flags, bring our attention to the last 4 years, and I think you might have a realization of what exactly is going on. And that was nothing more than, in my opinion, the biggest fraud on the history of the world. This in of itself, in construct, your RNA, which was the very construct of the delivery system of this thing, is a Xerox copy of your DNA. That's generally how it works, right? So now we have this understanding that someone is commandeering your gene strand. You're basically puppeteering the very infrastructure of what tells your physical body how to express itself through the deeper nature of what the seed of your existence is. So you're literally surrendering your control of what's being expressed in your genetic makeup, which through epigenetics has been very clear. Your thoughts can be altering and switch on and off your gene expression at will. Once you master that, and that's why I always bring people back to mastering the energetic aspect of it and really getting deep into being the master of your 50 trillion cells. You're the maestro of that 0.07 millivolts of electricity. And then you start to go deep into being able to operate something that would scientifically be not possible, from accessing the unconscious mind and the autonomous behavior that your body has. You have the ability to commandeer that any way you choose to. I mean, understanding that the old school idea that certain things, only very few organs regenerate themselves within the body, is an absent patent false. It's a lie. Every single organ in your body can be regenerated, and it has the ability to regenerate itself. And so when we start talking about parasympathetic and sympathetically innervated neural networks, you are now getting off to the races. So when I have a very healthy conversation with a neuroscientist about the fact that there's no way you can feel a third eye, there is no evidence of any neural pathway that would be able to identify or express that in your mind consciously, is a false patent. It's a lie. It's a lie, because once you commandeer the energies of your cells, you will feel everything. You will feel all the organs, the solid organs that were told to you that were not sympathetically innervated. So that means, what does that mean in a nutshell for ladies and gentlemen and ladies? It means that you are not able to feel these organs, and that's why you always fall victim to your imminent demise, because the doctor's description of it is, well, because you can't regulate these things, we need to get your blood work at least once or twice a year, because you are incapable of being able to sense or feel the operation of these organs. And if you're doing things that are inherently detrimental to the betterment of these organs, you won't find out to the wet ass hour, the 11th hour, which is absolutely a lie. And once you start mastering yourself and you get into the energetics, you can feel the very tip of the slightest movement in a dermal layer of your pinky toe on the third Sunday of the fifth moon of the turning of a new age, and you can do it at will. And that's what I do. I teach people how to master that, and you become the master keeper creator of your reality. Oh my goodness, I'll take a deep breath right now. But I would love you to share a little bit more on that, James.
Yeah. I had another thought there, but I might depress people a bit further. I don't know how much they can take of the what I'm trying to explain to people is that all the stuff that you're talking about is not just relevant to their daily life. It's not just relevant to manifest. It's relevant to our commandeering, to take it back, of the world itself. And all the reality that has been presented to us is a big lie again. And that's not to depress people. When you find out what's true, you're able to predict what's going to happen, because it fits a certain model. So, just the last example of the grimmers before we move on, or of a thing to think about, just as a thought experiment, or just to begin to understand that you have to think of the world in a different way. And I've talked about this elsewhere, so people can go and look. I've talked about the area around the British Museum and around Russell Square, and this, in a contemporary context, is where companies like DeepMind were based. It's kind of not an accident. I'm not saying anything bad against them, but Russell Square was where a lot of the poetry came. T.S. Eliot, The Wasteland, was also why you came back into my head was you mentioned about messenger DNA, and one of the first talks I did when I was on a master's course in the 80s was on a case called Genentech, which was about the patentability of this technology. So I was reading about it then. I'm not sure if I'm any wiser since, but I understand the basic things. I did a presentation in the Institute of Advanced Legal Studies. And a few hundred yards from there was where J.D. Bernal, this man we talked about that wrote The World of Flesh and the Devil, lived. Just a little bit walk away from the British Museum. So you have the British Museum, Russell Square, and the University College London. This was where Karl Marx, of course, wrote a lot of his work. Engels came there and walked around and wrote about the sort of people that developed communism. If we walked, it would take us a 10-minute walk down to King's Cross Station. There, we would encounter the place where Lenin first met Trotsky, in the same area. If we came back to the Russell Square and walked a 5-minute walk, we would be in the place where H.G. Wells lived, the man that wrote all this science fiction, The War of the Worlds, being invaded by Martians, that wrote the New World Order, The Open Conspiracy.
Wow.
Even a 15-minute walk, we would be where Mary Shelley lived, that wrote Frankenstein, that was understanding that something was gone. Edgar Allan Poe lived there as well, who, of course, there's a dark element where he's understanding what's going on. And you have the British Museum, and you have all this clustering of the creation of systems, and they're all about the same thing. It was in there that Arthur C. Clarke realized that he was going to, contribute towards building this new order. There was a famous lecture there where they talked about the British Empire extending to, its global governance, and that's why Arthur C. Clarke followed on from H.G. Wells and wrote about, the benefits of ruling the world with satellite communication. And actually, on Russell Square, there's UCL, University College London, and you have Senate House, and Senate House was where the Ministry for Information was during the war, which was the model for George Orwell's Ministry for Truth. So it's out of that area, around there. Aldous Huxley was very much involved in that area. G.K. Chesterton writes an essay about the Diabolist, where he meets a fella and he realizes that the guy is a Diabolist, as he calls, who worships the devil, and it's in that area. So you have all this. It's also the area where the magic shops that Aleister Crowley would have gone, because they all went to the British Museum, to the Egyptian things. You have this connection, strange connection with the ancient world, the occult, and science, they all go together with this materialist idea, and the idea that we see this pot. I only say that to begin to look at the interconnections, not just in your body, not just you and nature, but also what is out there, what kind of dragons are forming and have formed and move and operate and things, and to begin to develop your conscious awareness in an intellectual way as well. We can't avoid this anymore. We can't say, oh, that's too difficult for me. That's too difficult for me. I'm not listening to that. You can make an effort to understand that you own the world, that it's the people who have the right to assert themselves. The world is for the people. The people have the right to this world, the right to ownership. We've accepted. Now, I'm not advocating. I'm very, very clear. I'm advocating a peaceful consciousness change in order to change this, even for the people involved in it themselves, because ultimately this will be a disaster. That there's been certain mindset that has come into it. So the benefit as well of doing the things, of studying things like Taoism, of studying the text, benefit the individual, the planet, and nature in a real sense. And we say the nature of the world, the nature of the earth as a living being. And to go back to the more Taoist idea, you talked about the mind implants, and there is a story that sticks in the mind I think it might be in the book of Lao Tzu, where he talks about a guy who's working for the government, and he's out and he's staying in a tavern, and he's thinking about his career and where I'll go. And he may fall asleep, and when he wakes, he had a dream, and in the dream, he sees what happens in the future. He becomes very, very successful, rise to the top, and then everything is taken away from him. And he decides then to not pursue that path. But he realizes then that there was a guy sitting in front of him, one of the immortals, that implanted this realization in his mind, which now that's the positive form that you talked about. That is what the teachers are talking about fundamental natural communication. It's not implanting something in your brain. It's about utilizing wisdom and in ways that we can communicate, influence, connect with each other. That's all there in the text. And in many ways, we have to up our game. We have to develop our telepathic capabilities. That's one of the things that we have to do. We have to, again, not in a very, we can do it in ways that it shouldn't be so scientific. The more scientific it is, the more capturable it can be. I don't support the Dalai Lama and his investigations of meditation, context, and all that with science, because it will capture those things. It will give away things that will enable us to be controlled. I think he's made a major mistake on that, and I don't care if people, again, one of the people, you're not allowed to criticize the Dalai Lama. I think he's made a massive mistake on that, and I find it very unenlightened, as I find it very unenlightened to listen to some of the things about the present Pope about social things. It doesn't make any sense in relation to what they're meant to be doing. So people have to find their voice, and that's an important aspect for me. I found in writing and in art is that there's actually a whole lot of other voices in your head anyway. So what you have to do is purify it, so your voice begins to come through, to clarify that process. So when you're writing initially, when you started up years ago, and there's a kind of form coming through, and you're beginning to realize, well, it's not really me. And finding your voice is a difficult thing. Same as finding your style, so you have to do that as well. But also spiritually, you have to find the thing that speaks to you. It may be Buddhism, it may be Taoism, it may be Christianity, and move on. And we can all move on, and we can move to a higher level together, reinforcing and not be set up as we will be set up in the future to fight against each other. This person says this person says that. They're against when they're not. The false enemy. We should recognize our common spirituality in that. So I don't want anything I say to appear negative, but that's the reality. And one of the things that Taoism is good at is very pragmatic. It doesn't deny the reality. it seeks to deal with the thing and to move on. So I appreciate that spirit of pragmatism that's fundamental in Taoism and is clear. And also, they're very good at insisting on seeing the humor in it, that we don't get depressed, we don't get miserable, that we have to laugh at the cosmic hubris of some of it and the comedy that's being played out. But we don't want to get the bad or the butt of the joke or to be the butt of the joke in the thing.
Yeah. Oh, no. I mean, when you look at the depth of what we just revealed to the audience, I would agree 100%. There's a couple of people right now that, and my personality gets a little rustled when they've sort of like systematically dismantled a very ancient, powerful, sacred moment into a bunch of neural networks that acquire a miracle enlightenment. And so, and their justification for this very narrative is it's better when people know more. And I'm still a little bit on the fence as to the true nature of what they're doing, but they are, definitely making people more aware of certain things. Like within Taoism, we speak about the three major dantians in the body, and you create the architecture through the alchemical processes to develop this very refined system that you can really move and separate and cultivate and merge energies and all this kind of good stuff. Now, they've sort of watered it down to, well, we're demystifying the mystical aspect, and we're just giving you the practical application. And if you understand the science, then you don't have to be spiritual. You don't have to be religious. You don't have to be anything. Just understand how these mechanisms work. And fundamentally, sure, giving people more insight, and I share this with people because it's already been revealed, but I agree with you 1,000,000%. The deep diving in how to deconstruct us accessing someone's unconscious to the type of nature and level that they have done over history brings me to this sort of point where I had a conversation with Thoth. At one point I channeled him. I think we might have talked about this last episode, maybe not. And he was not a high frequency energy by any stretch of the imagination. And the deeper nature of his revelation was not alluding to, but directly telling me that this whole exploration of the emerald tablets is to commandeer people's mental, emotional, and spiritual state, physical state. And by everyone that puts their eyes on these ancient texts, translated in all different forms, will literally be his. And so his words were, I am going to control them at a conscious and unconscious level and all these. And I'm just like, yeah, this is crazy. Like, I'm getting this information from this, what perceives to me as an ominous sort of frequency, and the confession of this is the true nature of what this is. And all of a sudden, there's this fundamental obsession across all social media about the Emerald Tablets, Egypt. There's a system of events that are taking place right now within this New Age spiritual community that is bringing their attention to this, and everyone's falling into it. And it's a hermetic sort of state of awareness, and these are the laws of the universe. I always preface, when you're constructing things that are laws, understand they are man-made and they're created for a reason. So when you add that word law to the universe, I'm a little apprehensive to the understanding of what that means to you and where you're going with the very narrative of these things. So there's all this sort of stuff that's being narrated and sort of merged into your perception of reality, and it's coming in all different forms. It's hitting you hard. The science is the answer. Quantum physics is the answer. I mean, listen, I even have a situation where we have this very ancient practice where you observe the death of a star, the rising of the red phoenix, which is developing the middle dantian, and reveals black hole energy. And people are like, "Oh, that's no, actually, it's not. It's a connection." Now, what's really profound about that is that one of my students who has a PhD does a lot of research for a very large university here in America. He gets a grant to do research on the nucleus of a cell. And he comes to me and he goes, Jufu, you're not going to believe what I found. And I'm like, please tell me. And now he's been using these practices to cultivate and obtain levels of consciousness for a long time. I've been teaching this stuff. And he goes, I found black hole energy. And I'm like, what are the chances of that? And now, understanding the deeper nature of all things, if you truly understand you are the universe is you, and it's integrated in right down to a subatomic particle, an expression of all things. Wow, I didn't have science giving me a roadmap to what that was 10,000 years. I will dispute the timeline at this point with more understanding of when was the real true nature of this. And we go over it with the Yellow Emperor, the Jade Emperor, how this information was constructed, the relationship of the universe. But let's just say thousands of years ago, they weren't being given guidance from some talking head that said, I found the discovery of the unified theory field of understanding that it's all interconnected and the entanglement of all things. Yet there's benefit to certain things for the reason that it's being released. It's not just sort of unraveled with the nature of helping humanity. There's always some type of angle from this sort of this new language. It's a very new language, science, quantum physics. It's so new that, quite frankly, you want to measure the test of times, take an ancient language like, Chinese, i.e. grades of Mandarin, Cantonese, right back to pictographs and oracle bone reading. There's a progression to how we've transcribed and documented history. And then what is that? How is that being diluted over time? Clearly, it's been doctored and manipulated. And quite frankly, anything you access in relation to Taoism is a misdirection and a lie in most cases. And people are like, well, how can you say that? I'm like, I'll show you. I'll show you the practices that will fundamentally rock your world, that access states of awareness that you are truly all things. And that comes from ancient stuff. So I am blown away by, this realization. And for the audience, I think they're having epiphanies left, right, and center. They're probably just like, I don't know what to, it's mind melting. Well, it doesn't have to be. James and I are not attempting to melt your mind. We're attempting to awaken. I'm sorry, I was mistaken. Waken. There's a fundamental difference. So I've given you a few interesting tidbits I would love for you to share.
It's very strange that you say that, because I wasn't aware of this recent. I know about the Emerald Tablets, I know about the history, and I know about the genuine texts that came out during the Renaissance, and they were important in the translation by the Medicis and the Florence Academy. And I followed all that. I've written about that. I've written in the context of magic, and referenced that and tried to explain about a universal idea of light and what it meant, etc. And today, I came to the conclusion. I wasn't following, but I heard a bit about Emerald Tablets, and I said, no, that stuff is wrong. So the exact same today. It's just before. Undelayed. I don't know how it came up, but just today I said, no, that's not genuine.
Well, brother, I'll privately give you the channel, and it's chilling. It's
Yeah,
not.
yeah. So I don't know anything about that, but I said no. That's so. Again, good luck to people. I'm not. But no, the alarm bells went off when I heard a certain thing. So I'm not going to say anything about anybody or whatever. I don't even. So, but this. So yeah, I agree with you. But that's the other thing about synchronicity and awareness.
I had no idea of what that was. Right.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is
No, never. No.
I
But
get.
just today.
Yeah, I
So
get.
that thing.
I mean, I just get this information. I got it directly having a conversation with him. And that's the thing, is like, and because from my perception through history, when I'm not really involved with it, I didn't get involved with pyramids until Lao-Tzu told me to go and look at the Chinese pyramids in the Chinese landscape. Then I went deep on it, but I don't get immersed in information. I just listen very carefully. When I had an interaction with Thoth, this was the very messaging that he gave me, and it was.
Well,
It
that's what
was
I would say is I would corroborate my sense from looking at its presentation and say, no, that's, and so I support that. That's my instinct about it without having looked at it. A deep instinct. So I was getting a bit of sometimes I get a bit of, not I can feel the presence. I mean, it's a bit heavy when you're picking up these things, but there you go.
Yeah,
So I was getting that today.
that'll cheer you. But when you watch it, because I recorded it because I channeled him, right? And it's like, holy crap. And I put it on the channel for a minute, and I was getting, I think 100 views, and then I pulled it because it just is frightening, quite frankly. And it doesn't go in line with the whole messaging.
Well, I'll tell you, you'll get opposition to that because
Right.
my sense is, certain things come up because they're meant to come up, and they will, and so, and also this thing of reducing it to scientific. There's a usual line about this. Oh yeah, well, we can have a kind of utilitarian. We can take the thing and we can have the practice, and you don't need anything else, and we don't want any dogma. And they even say it in the same way. They'll turn their nose up. No dogma. So, I mean, if you say, well, which is the dogma that you don't want? Like say, if Christianity is love God and love your neighbor, is it that? Is it, you don't, okay, you don't love God, you want to replace, we know that. What about loving your neighbor? Is that, can we have that as well? Or, which one of the Buddha's noble truths are you not kind of, which dogmatic statements, about non-injury or whatever like that, or right words, which one of them do you not actually like? So this thing about, oh no, we don't want any dogma, is a classic Promethean attitude. So Prometheus is a robber, so he will not only rob the gods, he'll rob the humans. They're titans, they're superhumans, they're not humans. So they're willing to rob the humans as well, or rob what belongs to the divine, the techniques and that as well, and give them to the humans, like they robbed fire. Here you go. It's us you look up to, us, the superhumans, who are going to re-engineer your consciousness, and you've seen that we give you those good things. We give you all those chemicals that enable you to talk to the mechanical elves. And I would say to people, oh yeah, it's great. We've seen all these mechanical elves and they're waving to us. No, I'm saying, well, did you make a contract with them? What do you mean? I didn't talk. There was waving and all that. How do you know in their world what your behavior meant? If you have ontologically entered into their world, how do you know what you have agreed to or not agreed to? So you go on to the next world. Oh yeah, goodbye to my. It's time to go now. I'm 80 years old. You're moving in. And here's these little mechanical elves saying, oh, delighted that you decided to join us. I didn't decide to join us, but why were you messing around in our world? Why were you, etc.? You understand me? The people are dealing with things that they have no idea, and they assume that they can enter into these things with no consequences, that they're, into beings that they don't understand, or with beings that they're actually forming a link with if they believe that they're real. So we also have to think of, how do we reapply? How do we use what the Taoists told us to use in teaching? So the Taoists told us to use water, to look at water, to understand how it flows, to understand how it seeks the lowest, the humility, it goes to the lowest, that it wears away stone, that it moves in vortices, and all that. So there's two things I want to say about that. One example of a person who did understand this intuitively, I don't think he used any Oriental philosophy, he may have, was the scientist Victor Schauberger. I don't know if you've looked at him, but he was, now on Wikipedia they call it, he's a pseudoscientist. He wasn't a pseudoscientist at all. They usually say that about people that were good, like Tesla and people like that. So he was a forester in Austria, and he was up. I used to sit down and look at the water, and he began to wonder how fish could swim upstream. You know, how they could swim upstream. And he began to study the flow of water. And he began to understand that it was a series of complex vortices. And that, see, when we think, it's a famous thing in Ireland, you know, the salmon jump up to go across the Atlantic and they jump up the thing. And even in ancient Irish, there was the salmon leap. The warrior did a salmon leap. So we think of, the salmon is there and they're getting all their energy, and then they must kill themselves getting up. It must be very, very difficult. But really, the salmon is feeling, the word that you use, is feeling the particular spins and eddies and vortices in the water, which give them propulsion in some of these, which enables them to swim up, because there is a counter force as well moving in the opposite direction, as we know in all the Taoist directions, where it's like a mushroom. There's a force moving forward, but there's also a force moving back, and they can use those forces. And he was the one that was asked, he was enlisted, he didn't really have any choice in this, by Hitler, to develop the disc flying things, because what he developed was these disc things that could fly, that didn't work in the usual way by propulsion, but it worked by induction in the other way, as we draw energy into ourselves. He used this in a scientific principle. And late after the war, he was brought over to the United States, and he said they took his technology away. And then all of a sudden, you have in the 50s, flying discs gone around the United States. You had the X-plane thing started in Britain that was brought over, the secret plane thing. And you had these the things that looked like the thing he had invented. It's recorded he invented. But he was informed by, he applied scientifically these principles. And some of the high technology that will come out will come back from understanding these basic things. But one image that I was thinking about trying to understand or explain to people some ideas is about, if we think about on water and we think about this difficult issue about the soul coming into life and what it is. Now, Bernardo Kastrup explains in his view of idealism that there's this great mind and that we are disassociated elements of this, as in like the way personalities break into or something gives birth to something. We're disassociated from this same, but we're of the same thing, as they say in Taoism. The soul is the same essence as the Tao. So, but there is this disassociation. I wouldn't explain it in quite the same way, but it's an interesting philosophical description that's consistent with his idea of idealism, that the whole world, happens in your head, and it does so because we're a reflection of the higher thing. So it's very sophisticated, well argued, rigorously argued philosophical description. But then the question would be, and he said this led him to then say, well, if that's true, I have to accept that there's an afterlife, and I haven't been thinking in those terms. He's quite honest, which I respect about him. So then the us, as the disassociated spirit, would reassociate after death. That would be the idea, that would be reassociating to this source, if you like, in some way going back to the source. But if we imagine ourselves as water, if we make the analogy of that in some ways, we're like water. And chemically then we're the H2O. So we're actually two parts. We're the hydrogen and the oxygen are two elements. So when we come into this life, to use the analogy as water, we get separated. Imagine we're one or the other, where our consciousness becomes, say, the hydrogen element or whatever. And as we go out of the world or move, we want to reassociate. We want to, at some stage or in the world, we want to reassociate with other elements so we can reconstitute ourselves, reassociate ourselves, whatever. All the spiritual traditions warn us about getting attached to things, about getting bound to things, about getting caught in sin, about getting caught by the devil. So the analogy would be, as in chemistry, that the hydrogen thing, which essentially needs to join with the oxygen and reassociate ourselves, can't do so. Why? Because it gets bound in something else. And this can happen with hydrogen when it's split from oxygen as well. So that thing would be bound in a way that it couldn't recover in a way that it can re-enter properly into the space in which it came from. It couldn't be whole. So we can think of, we can begin to think in terms, simple terms, to explain some of these complex things by looking at water, which in some way has been presented to us as the teacher. There are fundamental lessons in. And I talked to someone that worked in Los Alamos on water, and she learned in school that it's hydrogen and oxygen, that's water. And he was amazed and expressed amazement, a constant amazement about their lack of ability to understand the nature of water, that it was so many. He did it very respectfully, explaining there's so many permutations that water can arrange itself in its crystalline structure, that it's very, very difficult to understand, and they don't understand at the top. And people don't understand that they don't understand some of the things that we think are the simplest. So as well as going greener in Ireland, since I was a boy, they have, covered the fields in concrete, polluted the rivers, the God-given, whatever you want to call it, earth-given, goddess-given beauty that was there since time immemorial, to build up this society for short-term materialistic thing, and all of these things separate us in the way that we're not meant to be separated. We get bound in things, and bondage is the essence of slavery. Binding is the essence of sorcery and black magic, to bind things together. And what's happening is that the soul is becoming separated from the Tao, from God, from the higher forces, and we're not meant to do that. That's why C.S. Lewis said, why the Taoist teachers are trying to explain that you have to stay close to not just the higher forces, but the other elements of yourself, which are divine and need to be able to reintegrate into the system, to reassociate in the system at the end of life as it moves on. Otherwise, we'll not be able to. We'll be limited in our capacity in where we go afterwards. And the last point, I'm interested. I heard you discussing again. I couldn't listen to everything, but I need to inform myself about your good work. But you were discussing recently about moving towards the light and afterwards, and this, and that's a very interesting thing that I noticed happened in the last 5 years. This less even, but particularly in the last couple of years, a new Gnosticism, and now there's two types of Gnosticism. A lot of people are misinformed about what actual Gnosticism is. Of course, there was the Nag Hammadi things that were discovered in 1943, but actually the original source we only knew about it because of the Catholic Church. People say the Catholic Church hid it. They presented it and said this is a heresy, so that it gave us the evidence that we had. So Gnosticism with a capital G refers to that tradition. It's very, very interesting. I'm very interested in it. But then there's Gnosticism with a small g, which refers to the thing actually that we're talking about, is the sense of gnosis, knowledge, self-knowledge. It's not necessarily, it's not related necessarily to that tradition, which has a whole apparatus as well with a capital G. And so gnosis with a small g is a good thing, because it describes self-knowledge without all the other accoutrements that say, because if you go back and look at some of the things they say are Gnostic, they're very against the flesh. They're against the body. They don't like the body. They believe everything is in prison. They believe nature is a prison, and they believe everything is a trap. And some of it is not as great as people think if they look at some of the text. And Thomas Henry Huxley, who is the epicenter of this movement against the supernatural, spirituality, the teacher of H.G. Wells, the bulldog of evolutionist theory, the one who developed scientific racism, he was the one that coined the term agnostic. So people say, well, I'm agnostic, thinking they mean, well, I haven't made up my mind yet, but it doesn't mean that. Agnostic is agnosis, the opposite to gnosis, the opposite to self-knowing. You're saying, I don't know, and I obviously don't want to know, or you're saying the opposite to self-knowledge. And you're saying what he says in his definition is, if you want to believe everything, you have to scientifically prove it first. So you can't say I believe in this Tao because it's not scientifically proven. It's an impossible standard. Don't say you're agnostic. Whatever you do, you might as well be a dyed-in-the-wool atheist. Don't say you're agnostic unless you understand what you're saying, because it's one of these traps to drag you to drag you into something else. So you got me going there on that. So the point was that some of these things can help us answer very, very deep philosophical issues, and there is a possibility of simplicity that we need to explain using the latest philosophical and scientific thing where relevant. But the scientific thing will never replace it. What we're talking about, remember, when they're putting all the electrodes in your head and say, here's this and this part is here, this is called, as the writer whose name will come back to me, called the verificationist method. You say something which is true if you can prove it. So it's putting the cart before the horse. So because we can measure this means that's that, and have this. It's not the thing in itself. It's only the reflection of it. It's only the footprint of the being. So we say, oh, look at a footprint, and we say, oh, that's the person. It's not the person. It's only the impact that they have made in a particular thing. It doesn't explain consciousness at all in any way. But some of the deep sense of Taoism is consistent with the perennial philosophy, and because of its location in nature, it could have a very, very useful role to play in conjunction with the other spiritual traditions to help us separate the wheat from the chaff, to give directions to people, to give inspiration, spirit coming in, so that they recover this dispiriting process that's built into the system, that's supported by all the educational system, that took over all the schools that your children go to, which were also taken over by other political forces, and also taken over, as the literature shows, by the military-industrial establishment. Most of the technology used in school came from military sources. Overhead projectors, they came from that. They spun off that. Everything was intended, and poor kids have to go into school now and, get all these, they're living in an electronic soup, with all these computers and mobile phones and this, that, and the other, and iPads, and it's meant to be some liberate. Who acceded to all the? Nobody. They just told you what you were getting. Bill Gates said in his book in the 1990s, The Road Ahead, we have to hook children. That's the word he used. We have to get children hooked on information technology. So we say the good thing. Yeah, the good thing is the thing on the hook that hooks us. This is a nice piece of meat on the hook that baits the fish. Baits have to be nice. He made it very, very clear. They were going to get your children hooked. This is the language of the drug pusher, the same philosophy. The drug pushers, the people that run the drugs, the people that get the people addicted. It's the same language. It's in his own stuff. They have done that to the poor kids, and we have allowed that to happen. And it's pervasive. It's going to be very difficult for the children to develop normally in this process of neuro warfare. And it's going to get worse. So all of those reasons really require us to have our feet on the ground and to go back to some of the sources and to reapply them, to look at them and say, okay, I understand that myself. And then also to say, well, how does it help me to to integrate some of the recent, some of the good stuff that's trying to vindicate who we are. So we begin to have a coherent analysis, that we can have something, a proper picture of the world. Because one of my arguments is, if we don't understand what we're dealing with, we can't have any solutions to it. Until we have a robust analysis that's viable from a number of different perspectives, that will stand up to scrutiny, that will be historically, evidentially correct. There's a case which is made that will persuade people. We won't get any response. We won't be able to move forward. And I think Taoism and re-examining some of the teachings and thinking about them freshly will help us.